Why is the Jewish history of Rivne city still a blind spot in the history of Ukraine?
I think it has to do with our history education, what is called Ukrainian ethnocentrism, and the desire to supersede everything non-Ukrainian.
When a city becomes monocentric, Ukraine-centric, it does its best to commemorate and cultivate the memory of its heroes.
From our point of view, Ukrainian history comprises not only the history of ethnic Ukrainians, but also the history of all ethnic groups that inhabited Ukraine at different times, including representatives of the Jewish community.
Shocking facts about the Holocaust in the Rivne region.
The plundering of the Holocaust victims' homes was socially acceptable.
Things that you most likely have never heard before. Welcome to the Cities program. Tune in. It's going to be interesting. In this street, not far from downtown Rivne, during the 30s and 40s, there used to be several synagogues, all next to one another. All in all, the city of 50,000 people had about 30 synagogues. Jewish streets like Shkilna were ubiquitous. After all, the city that is commonly believed to be Ukrainian or Polish was really Jewish. In the 1920s, 8 out of 10 city dwellers spoke Yiddish.
Information about the Jewish population size in Rivne can be found in the archives. Overall, it was 60 to 80% of the population. When Rivne locals hear about this for the first time, they are utterly surprised, if not shocked.
In other words, Jews were the largest ethnic group in Rivne. Impressive, is it not? Second largest was the Polish group, then the Ukrainians.
That means Ukrainians predominantly lived in villages.
We can only wonder what Rivne might look like today if it had not been for the Nazi occupation. After all, in 1941, the demographic and resulting ethnic landscape of Rivne changed dramatically.
There were up to 30,000 Jews in Rivne before the war. And there is this testimony by a famous Jewish doctor, Tabachnik, who wrote in his letter that only 19 people survived out of those 30,000. I'm from Rivne. I was born here. I went to school here. I didn't have the slightest idea about the tragedy, about the Holocaust in Rivne that had taken place during the World War II.
Natalia Ivchuk, scientific researcher with Mnemonics, non-governmental organization. She explains, such ignorance of your own city's history is very common. It's not at all an exception. The vast majority of Rivne natives don't know what the city went through 80 years ago. By the way, Mnemonics is the only organization in Rivne that not only studies the Holocaust history of this region, but also treats historical amnesia and restores what's been almost blotted out from people's memory.
During the Soviet era, Rivne kissed goodbye to Jewish history, as did the rest of Ukraine and other former Soviet territories.
The first Jews in Rivne were machine-gunned in July of 1941, and at the beginning of November a great tragedy took place at the outskirts of the city, which is almost equal to Baba Yar's tragedy in Kiev.
At Sosinki ravine, 17,500 Rivne Jews were shot dead.
17,500 Jews were massacred. Don't these numbers and facts make your blood run cold? This is how Rivne native Solomona Geshelevna Kusman recalled the events of that day.
When people reached Sosinki, they were forced in groups out of the crowd to the dugout holes. They had to strip naked and step on logs across the holes. When a group of people stepped on a log, a burst of machine gun fire could be heard, and people fell right into the hole.
But there's more to this tragedy.
That part of the Jews who escaped Sosinki got into the ghetto.
There really was nowhere to flee, since they found themselves in a foreign hostile environment. They were turned in for things like a bag of sugar or salt, alcohol or gasoline, basic consumer goods during the war.
The State Archive of Rivne region has a unique document, a list of names of those who were forced into the ghetto. This document proves the reality of everything that took place in this city. Here it is. The number 5,403 is mentioned here. That many Jews, according to this document, went to the ghetto. It was situated not far from today's downtown, behind the railway tracks. This is how the area looks today.
This was an open ghetto, meaning there were no fences. However, the prisoners were not allowed to leave the territory of the ghetto, and they had curfew. The ghetto was guarded.
8 months of hard labour in the dead of winter, with almost no food, but still with hope for a happy ending of that hell. Unfortunately, the prisoners of Rivne Ghetto couldn't escape death. On July the 13th, 1942, the Nazi authorities carried out the final liquidation of the ghetto, and more than 5,000 of the Jewish population concentrated there were taken in the direction of Kostopil settlement and machine-gunned. And now, listen closely. While at Sosenki, where the Jewish mass grave is, you can see the memorial signs that keep the memory of the Holocaust alive. But at the former ghetto territory, there's neither a memorial sign or a plaque with even the information about the place, neighborhood, or houses.
There's very little information available about the events that took place in Rivne, including the ghetto.
And there's so much to remember. Mnemonics, scientific researchers, bring up social aspects of the Holocaust history as well. In addition to the victims and murderers, there were so-called bystanders. To put it simply, indifferent observers of the non-Jewish population. So these are some facts about this population group. Their responsibility in the plundering of the Holocaust victims is a fact, which they find difficult to grasp, let alone accept.
Plundering of the Holocaust victims was very common at the time. In other words, it wasn't a one-off event. It wasn't something done exclusively by fringe elements accustomed to robbing. Rather, it was socially acceptable. A consensus was reached that it was okay to plunder, and if somebody didn't, they were pressured by others and viewed as outsiders. Therefore, refusal to plunder was rather uncommon.
After the shooting in Sosenki, the victims' belongings were stored in the main synagogue in Rivne. The best stuff went to Germany, or simply to German soldiers and officials positioned in the city. The rest was sold to the locals. In order to buy anything that belonged to Holocaust victims, one needed to simply submit an application to the city administration.
Please allow me to purchase the house of this type, or please allow me to purchase the following things, since I am poor and have no means to obtain them otherwise. And a list of things was attached: a coat, a shirt, shoes. By the way, there was a shortage of shoes then, so they were in high demand.
Interestingly enough, not only shoes or clothes were of particular interest to the locals.
Lots of Jewish people held positions of merchants, craftsmen, doctors, but after they were massacred, Poles and Ukrainians began claiming those positions.
The main task of present-day scholars in Rivne is to restore historical justice, to study and present history accurately and in an unbiased way.
We try to talk about the memory that has been formed regarding the Ukrainians, the Poles and the Jews. This kind of Ukrainian history is more objective, it's more holistic, plausible, and this is why I do this. Without such background, It's difficult to develop tolerance, which is of paramount importance if we talk about humanity as a whole.
I believe that this problem isn't exclusive to Rivne. It goes far beyond. Unfortunately, it's the case with many cities and towns in Ukraine.
You might never have thought about this, but this veil of silence prevents us from assuming responsibility for our own history. It won't let us learn from the lessons of the past.
The topic shows how intolerance, xenophobia, racism, prejudice can end. Under certain conditions, our prejudice can be manipulated, which can lead to atrocious consequences, as the Holocaust history shows.
Without waiting for somebody else to commemorate the Holocaust in Rivne, Mnemonics has taken the lead and is doing just that. Besides organising events in the sphere of informal education, scientists work on preserving a visual memory.
We are very proud that the stumbling stones have been installed in Rivne. It was realized 2 years ago in the summer. This was the project partly financed by our organization and partly by people from Europe. As of now, Rivne is the second city in Ukraine where this form of commemoration has been realized.
Stumbling Stones is an international project. They're installed in the cities where the Nazi terror victims lived. As of 2017, around 70,000 stones were installed in some of these cities of Europe. Interestingly enough, the stones that were installed in Rivne are not exclusively to commemorate the Jews, but also the Ukrainians and the Poles. Additionally, the team is working on installing a monument at the entrance to the ghetto territory. With its liquidation, the Jewish page of Rivne's history has suffered irreversibly, and its memory must be preserved for coming generations. Not so long ago, on the corner of Soborna Street and Doroshenko Street, a memorial was installed in the form of a menorah in the window of a half-ruined wall with a suitcase, symbolizing the violent uprooting.
We have this optimistic hope that this sign on its opening day will not only tell the story of this place but will serve as a reminder to Rivne locals that this used to be a Jewish city, that the majority of the population was Jewish.
This is more than just a story about the machine gun city. It's a story of adults and children who dreamed about a happy future. They had hopes and plans and expectations that were never fulfilled, just because all those people were born Jewish.